Hey, mister. Hey, your boom. Your boom is in the shot.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Your Boom is in the Shot with Ben and TJ. Hey, we got a pretty interesting one today. We're talking about the movie I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Now,
Charlie
Kaufman. And if you've ever seen a Charlie Kaufman movie before, you know that this is probably going to be a mindfuck.
It most definitely is a fucker of the mind.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump right into my 30-second thoughts.
Yes.
Let me pull up the coveted iPhone timer of justice. To make sure nobody uses uses too much time. So I loved it. I really did. I think it's amazing. It's fucking harsh. It's a brutal movie. And not in the way that you're probably assuming when I say that. It is definitely a mind fuck. It is incredibly clever. And I think about this movie like poetry, just like the way that there are so many different ways to interpret meaning and all of the meaning that's packed into it. It's not like straightforward in any way. But it's just a beautiful story. All right. I went over 32 seconds, 57.
It's pretty close, man. We're getting closer and closer every time.
All right. You're up, my friend.
And it's a Charlie Kaufman movie. That's my 30 seconds. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, it's like any Kaufman movie. It tells a story. It's about as straightforward as a bowl of fucking spaghetti, on the surface at least. But once you kind of examine it more, the true meaning, I think, kind of reveals itself, or some version of the true meaning. It might be different for everybody because it kind of is like that postmodern art piece in that way.
Oh man, so I
thought the acting for the like 5 actors that are in it was really good, especially Jessie Buckley as the young woman. Yeah, I've related to this movie way too much, and that's it. 30 seconds.
I'm not gonna lie, I like low key fell in love with Jessie Buckley.
Well, she was pretty dope.
Yeah,
she was pretty cool.
She's like, yeah, that's the kind of girlfriend I want.
Yeah,
low key
really deep art hoe.
Yeah, really deep art hoe. That's definitely
or a physicist, or whatever she is. She changes every 5 minutes. Well, but like that's kind of the point, right?
I know. It's kind of great.
You want to lead off story and plot?
All right. Can you do that? Is that a thing? So the movie is like based on a book. So I think that's an important thing to start off. Let me pull up the author because I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't do my research. I'm sorry.
Ian Reed or something.
I'm thinking of ending things. So it's based on a book, and the whole premise is it's this car ride between this couple, and like it starts off with the woman in her head saying to herself, "I'm thinking of ending things with Jake." And then it's just like this fucking performance art of them like acting like having a real world car ride with really surreal things happening. And then like they get to his parents' house, which is where they were going for dinner. And she keeps saying over and over again, like, we have to go back. I have to be at work in the morning.
And everything about this entire visit to the parents is just wrong.
It's just fucking awful. Yeah. Like it's the middle of a blizzard. And he keeps saying like, no, I'll just put chains on the tires. It's fine. And like,
there's like, a story about rotted pigs and
oh my God,
basement you can't go into with scratches on the doors and everything's lit like it's a fucking Blumhouse horror movie.
You have to, if you guys,
and Toni Collette is going full Hereditary the whole time.
Before we go any further, you guys need to watch the movie to understand this podcast.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you haven't watched this movie, we're going into spoilers, and I do not listen to spoilers without watching this movie.
It's not even like a spoiler issue. It's like you won't fucking know what we're talking about unless you watch this movie. It's not like a straightforward, like you can interpolate what's happening. No, this is like, it's just going to sound like a bunch of random garbage if you don't actually watch this movie and figure out what the fuck we're talking about.
So if you haven't, go watch it and come back.
Yeah, right. Watch it and come back. It's not a random movie. I mean, like, there seems like a lot of stuff that
once you
feels
frame it,
random.
And that's what I meant earlier when it's like as straightforward as a bowl of spaghetti until you let the true meaning reveal itself.
Yeah.
And I think so. So I watched the movie twice because the first time I was like, I think I like it, but I don't understand it. And the second time, everything clicked into place. And I think the moment where it really settled for me, there's a part where the young woman, as she's officially credited because her name changes like 10 times, says that she's showing Lucy, the parents her art. And the dad is like, I don't get it. I don't see a person there that's like looking sad. So I don't know how I'm supposed to feel sad looking at this thing. And she's like, it's just It's just a landscape. Imagine you're the person looking at it. And I think that's a lot of what this movie does is it goes through like these moods. And I think like you're not really supposed to like try to look at it like a standard thing like that. Like the father is trying to with the art. It's supposed to just be like, it's a landscape.
That's so meta. I didn't even pick up on that, but you're so right. Like she's showing him these like images that are moody. I mean, they're straight up moody. Like the compositions, the color choices, like her art is emotional the way that art is emotional for people who are critical of art.
Yeah.
And this movie is that in a movie, and it's amazing. And like my roommate Tanner, right? He hated this movie. He looked at this movie like that dad looked at Lucy's
That's
art.
exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I think that's amazing.
And I think if you see it that way, that's valid. But you missed the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and this is probably not the movie for you if
right.
that's the way.
And that's okay. But like for those that this movie is for, I think once the true meaning reveals its, well, what I think is the closest thing you could come to true meaning, and I think there's a lot of evidence to back up this being the true meaning, and what I'm about to say, it everything more or less makes sense. And I think the true meaning is that the old man janitor is Jake, old,
yeah,
and young Jake and the young woman, they just exist in his head. He's going through his motions all day at the school cleaning up, and he is like imagining this scenario where he gets to take this pretty girl who is like basically a figment of his imagination, that's like he's pulling from this one time he saw this girl at trivia night but didn't have the balls to talk to her. Yeah. And he's kind of imagining the path not taken of like what their relationship could have been, and he's imagining what she might be saying or she might be thinking, and that's why her personality keeps changing, her name keeps changing, her clothes keep changing, her occupation keeps changing.
It's almost like he's trying to rectify her existence in his life.
And that's why like you see the picture of like him as a kid that is like her for a second, because her and him, they're the same thing. They're not, because she is just, part of his imagination. I think he's imagining what it would be like if she was there for different phases of his parents and their life and their sicknesses.
Yeah, well, you see that over and over again. That her being there, like they've only been together for 6 weeks, but then again, her being there, she's always been there. Right. And like that, they keep like sort of juxtaposing that over the course of that like dinner visit. And it's really interesting because Lucy, because that's how she's officially credited in the Wikipedia article, and we know how Wikipedia is obviously
the credits of the film say the young woman.
Well, right, but what I'm saying is that Wikipedia is obviously the more trustworthy.
And correct. You're right. That overrules anything that's actually in the film.
Exactly my point. But for ease, I'm going to say Lucy because that's what I read when I opened it up on Google, and that's a lot easier to remember.
Lucy, Louise, Ames. Who cares?
Yeah, I think they call her Louise a lot. But anyway, so she's like disoriented through that whole sequence of events.
Yeah, and I think in the same way that the viewer is supposed to be, and that's why it starts off framing it like she is the protagonist, and you're seeing it through her perspective. And I think the people that this movie gets lost on never realize that that's actually not the case. Because they're like, wait, what's going on? How is she seeing the parents at different ages? How is like because. Yeah, it really is played from her perspective. And Jessie Buckley, with her facial expressions, her body language, her inflections, you know, like especially when she's like imitating that like film critic in the car.
Oh my God, with the cigarette.
Yeah, just crazy shit that she does. She's amazing in this movie. But like ultimately, it's all just a figment.
Can we talk about some like highlights? Because I think that's important. But I think that what's more important than like what actually happened or what it's supposed to have happened in terms of plot. I think like the meaning that they pack into this film.
The meaning is right in the title.
So many different ways.
And I think that is all like that encapsulates everything that we're saying about it being like figment versus real, her versus him. I'm thinking of ending things. We're made to believe that it's Lucy thinking of ending the relationship. What it really is old Jake thinking of killing himself. Yeah. And that's why that thought permeates everything. That's why every time it pops into her head, he interrupts it like he's hearing it.
It's like when Lucy's at the ice cream place and the girl's like, I'm scared for you. Yeah. It's like she's scared for Jake because he's like,
Jake is going to kill himself. Yeah. And he does in the end, I think. I think that's what we're led to believe. And that pig is like carrying him into the afterlife or some shit. The cartoon pig.
Yeah, it's definitely
like
possible.
I think he freezes to death in the truck, and like that's
really. You think that's the? I mean, like I don't
that's
even.
what it is.
I don't even care.
And I think when we see like really bad old people makeup Jake doing like the fucking at the end. That's like it's an imitation of some other film.
There's
like
a lot
Russell
of that
Crowe
in this movie. There's like I consider myself a film buff, but there are so many references to movies that I have not seen that are so like
They're like
weird.
highfalutin and like kind of pretentious. But again, that's the point. And I think that's kind of another thing that's missed on people who don't get the movie. They're like, oh, the movie's super up its own ass and pretentious, but like
totally the point.
Right, because I think that's Jake's whole frame of reference. I think Jake is like, you said this before the pod, that he's like a brilliant guy whose like life was wasted on like having like dumb parents on a farm. Yeah. You know, and I think his whole frame of like culture and his whole like frame of life and like socializing with people is all through the content he consumed, the poems that he read, the movies that he watched, right? And I think that's why a lot of those references are like super highfalutin or deep cut. It's just that's what Jake knows. We're this whole thing is just in Jake's mind.
Absolutely. I think that like that doesn't matter to me though, because to me, this film, just like the painting that Lucy shows, is not necessarily about the content of the painting. It's about the emotions that it evokes. And when I said in the beginning of my 30-second thoughts that I thought this movie was harsh, that's what I'm talking about.
It's just constantly really uncomfortable. Like everything about it, the so acting, like the surreal acting of the parents.
Sure, but I think it's so much beyond just uncomfortable. Like uncomfortable is like a long shot in a horror movie where like the camera
which this does
is rolling for just a little bit too long. This movie does that, but it does so much more. I mean, even the choice for the aspect ratio.
Oh yeah. The 4:3 aspect ratio.
That was the very first thing that you said to me when you started watching it. It was like, what's up with this aspect ratio?
Yeah, because that was the first thing I noticed.
And I did too. And I was like, and I when I first saw that, I was like hooked immediately. It's like, oh, it's like they're shooting it on like cheap film. I love it.
Yeah.
But like
it makes it feel super claustrophobic.
But that's exactly what I said. It's they're framing them in this little square box. We're so used to seeing the really comfortable ultra wide letterbox for films. That's like they're specifically for like the epic grandiose.
And our TVs are designed for it.
Right.
So like when you're watching it on a modern TV, like most people probably are, you're like seeing like almost looks like black walls enclosing them the whole time.
The whole movie, they're encapsulated in this little fucking box, and it's so upsetting. And like sometimes it's really subtle. Like sometimes it being in that aspect ratio isn't obviously disturbing, but a lot of the time it is. And it's like it's just one of those little ingredients that's adding to this overall like recipe for like. It's like harshness. Like, I don't know how else to put it.
Well, the message of the movie, I think, is pretty harsh too. Like, I think like the message, the whole overall message and vibe of the movie is like, everybody fucking dies. Life doesn't matter.
I mean, that's definitely one interpretation.
But at least that's Jake's like outlook. And I think that's what kind of comes through that way. I mean, there's probably different ways you can interpret it.
Well, I think that like,
it is harsh.
Like Kaufman said in an interview, like right after the movie that like, he's not going to tell people what it's supposed to mean.
No, because just like Lucy's paintings, he didn't put people in the painting. You're just looking at the painting and imagine you're seeing it. So it's whatever you see through your lens.
Right. And I think that
it's very postmodern.
And that's way. such a staple of poetry, you know, like that's how I learned to be like critical of art, is to not worry so much about what is the quote unquote, like meaning behind everything, but what is it? How does it make you feel? Like, what is it maybe about? What were they thinking when they wrote it? You know, all of these things are important.
I think this movie, I probably should have felt more that way. And I think maybe on the first watch I did, but I think I was so desperate to find the meaning in it. Yeah. And to make sense of a lot of the things that didn't make sense to me at first, that like, I gravitated right to what is actually going on.
I think that's totally valid though.
You know,
I like talk about that's valid cast. I think that's valid. Like, I think that's totally one of the intended responses. You know, I think that's successful. The film is successful when you feel that way about it. And like for me, it was all about the pure catharsis. Yeah. Like watching their awkward conversations on the ride up and thinking like, this is the most uncomfortably real conversation.
The car ride goes on for like a half hour.
The first one.
The second one goes on for like 40 minutes.
I know.
And like this movie still has a half hour left.
And there's so much stuff that happens in the car that's like incredible. I think that's another way that they box you in. And maybe this is speaking more to my personal experience, and that's why I feel this way about it. But like growing up, right? For me, if I was ever in trouble, or my mom wanted to really lecture me, or if she was going through emotion and needed like an outlet
for a car ride.
It was a car ride.
Yeah.
It was, me in the passenger seat, fucking terrified, uncomfortable, upset, emotional. That's how that made me
There's nowhere
feel.
to go.
There's nowhere to go
When you're in a car.
Right. And when you're not driving, you have no control.
Like later, like when the second car ride and like the woman's like, I got to go home. I got to go home. And he's like, no, we're going down this side. We're going to go be a dumpster down here somewhere.
Yeah, right. There's like, oh, this is where my school is. Like there's a garbage can. She's like, no, I don't care about the
school down here. And there actually is.
And there, right. But that's not the point.
Right.
Like the point is like,
and that's one of those times where like this movie constantly is like threatening to be a horror movie.
Yeah. But it's all about the feeling. And that's another place where
you're so unsettled.
Like they just grab your expectations and fucking run with it. Like the fucking door, right? The door to the basement. Yeah. We were talking about this earlier and how
it's all clawed up and like off limits.
And there's the scotch tape on it.
Our
and
expectations say something bad is down there.
And they keep doing these like very horror movie shots of it where it's like a slow track in from kind of far away.
And Jessie Buckley's selling the shit out of it with her facial expression and like kind of like going, why can't I go in there?
Why can't and he's just like, you can't go in there.
Can we talk about the fucking dog? The dog that just like wags like,
oh my God. Yeah.
Like, it just goes on way too long and it's super unsettling.
So, yeah. It's like uncanny.
It's some David
horror
Lynch
movie shit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But like before we get to the dog, I have more to say about this door.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, you're fine. It's just that like,
there's so many things in this movie. Every time you say one thing, I think of 10
like 5 other things that are like attached to it. And this door, like it's a very set up to be a horror movie shot. And as the viewer, we're led to believe, all right, something's in the basement. Something's dangerous is in the basement. Like I should be afraid for the main character because this basement has some sort of dangerous plot element to it. But that's not what the story is. That's not like what the basement is for.
No, the basement is the dark recesses of Jake's mind.
Sure,
and that's why it's off limits.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like
we don't go there because
see it like it's a horror movie because Jake reacts to it
like it's horror,
like he's afraid,
he's horrified by it.
Yeah, right. So we're meant to like led forcefully to believe that it's a horrifying thing, when in actuality it's just a basement. But but that's one of those ways where this movie is harsh. It just grabs you and it fucking throws you into emotion.
Or like the one line that I think really also sums up a lot of the harshness is like, well, I guess 2 lines that are related. There's when they get to the farm and he's like, yeah, life ain't always easy on a farm. And then later on in the movie when he goes back to the cartoon pig and the pig's like, somebody has to be a pig who dies rotting with maggots. Just happened to be you, kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me just talk about that pig real quick, because that's one of those things that I find really wild and uncomfortable about this movie is that like when he's describing the story about the pigs and he starts, oh, you want to hear a funny story or whatever it is that he says. And she's just kind of like, not really. And then, or maybe she's like, what about the pigs? And he's like reluctant to talk about it.
Oh yeah. He doesn't want to talk about it, but she like presses him. She's like, well, you can't just not tell me now. And he's like, all right.
And then he describes it in like awful detail of like these pigs that they left like over a winter or something without checking on them. And then they came in and the pigs looked fine, but then they weren't moving. So they lifted them up and the underside of them were just filled with maggots, but they were still alive, just rotting away slowly.
Yeah.
And like the meaning of that, right? Like what I just said, rotting away, like these pigs are still alive, but they're rotting away slowly is how Jake feels in his mind, right? Like that's how I interpreted that. But that's also
100%.
like an example of like that's his childhood was brutal and ugly and it looked like it was fine, but it never was.
Yep.
And I think that's like in and of itself kind of like a beautiful piece of imagery. And the pig comes back when they're at the school, which is another like I still
as
don't
a cartoon
as an animated like rotoscoped on pig thing. And like to this day I don't know exactly what that means.
I don't know for sure. Obviously, I don't think you can really know anything in this movie for sure. But like,
true.
Again,
but you're not supposed to know anything for sure.
No.
You're supposed to interpret.
But if you're going to try to find the closest meaning, like I attempted to, I think it's like his last moments of life, or it's like hallucinating. He's imagining the pig.
I mean, I think my thought process on that was that was a reminder that he was the pig, you know,
Right.
that the pig wouldn't and him were the
It's
same.
like almost his spirit animal.
Exactly.
Like carrying
Yeah,
him into
like-
the afterlife.
Right. Like guiding him.
Because he would pull this early memory from his childhood, you know? Like,
Yeah.
that would make sense for
Right.
Jake.
And I think that like this Jake character is really interesting, and like you brought up like frame of reference for like the pretension and stuff.
Yeah. When you go to his childhood room, like all the things that are referenced pretty much are like on his like bookshelf, like DVDs and books of poetry.
Right.
You know, like the poem that Lucy, when she's still Lucy, like says verbatim in the car as her poem is like actually in one of those books.
And that's really funny because he says he didn't read it, which is
Yeah.
really interesting. But that aside, I think that it's really interesting because I think a lot of the stuff in this film are very obviously from his point of reference. Like a lot of the obtuse stuff that doesn't really seem to make sense is because of his frame of reference.
Like Oklahoma playing on the radio.
or like when
Or anything to do with Oklahoma.
or the entire extended interpretive dance scene
Right.
at the end of the film when the janitor murders.
But even that's like straight up taken from Oklahoma.
Yeah, I know.
Like that's straight up like a sequence
Yeah.
from Oklahoma.
I know. It's
not like the dancing and the music itself, but like the story that it's telling.
yeah,
You
it's just, I think it's genius is what I think.
I agree.
And I could really see how people would watch this movie and just immediately lose it and just be like, I don't know.
Well, I think it's either for you or it isn't. And like,
yeah, for sure.
to be fair, I'm not like in any way rallying against people that like it isn't for, because like Synecdoche, New York
Isn't for you.
wasn't really for me either.
Yeah.
You know, in the way that I think this isn't for a lot of people, but this was for me. And I think, and I said this to you before the cast, I think like it's because I found, as uncomfortable as it made me, a lot that I related to in this movie.
Oh, yeah, me
I had
too.
threads to like hang on to that I didn't feel like I had in Synecdoche.
I think Synecdoche was for pretentious old men.
Right.
I don't think this movie was for pretentious old men. I think this movie was for young, real, like artistic people.
Right.
Like I think that like you and me with like our creative bent and like our analytical minds, like I think this movie was about people like us. And that's
agree.
why I think it's so
Well, and that's kind of what Jake
viscerally
is like
hard.
framed to be at
Yeah,
first. And at least that's
absolutely.
his idealized version of himself, is
Yeah.
he is like an artiste, you know?
I really struggled with Jake as a character because the whole time I watched that movie, I was like, oh, I totally know how he
and
feels.
again, I think this is more evidence for it being in his head, is
Yeah.
that I think like not that I have to like prove that anymore.
I mean,
I
it's
think,
supposed
but,
to
like,
be in his head if you've read the book.
but,
That's like
right.
the
But
way
I
it's
think
supposed to be.
like, because I struggle with him too, and I think it's probably, I'm going to go on a limb and say this might be a big part of why you
Mhm.
did, is that like Lucy keeps reinforcing that Jake's a good guy,
yeah,
but he keeps showing that he's
not. Yeah,
you know?
I do.
And I
know
think that's
exactly
him
what you
trying to
mean.
like color events himself. Like, oh no,
Right.
I'm a good guy.
yeah,
You know, I'm
yeah,
a good guy.
right. But he
Why-
keeps doing
nobody
shitty
would break
things.
up with me. I'm a good guy.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
But then he's like yelling at his mom.
Right,
know?
right. He's being kind of like selfish and
Yeah.
and like entitled and
And
kind
like
of a dick.
peeping on like teenagers. As
Yeah.
an old man.
Oh,
Like,
that's right. Yeah, right.
know?
And he does all kinds of weird stuff like that
Yeah.
in the movie. He's very controlling. He's very like, you know, like his mom is being sweet and talking about him as a kid and how much she loved him and all this other stuff. And his response is to just like be mad about it,
Mhm.
like a child. And like that was, I found him less endearing during those scenes.
Yeah.
But like, especially in the car scenes in the early part of the movie when they were having the conversation when Lucy is like, I'm thinking of ending things with Jake. And then she's going on about how he's a really nice person. And then they get along in these moments. And like, this is before I think that I applied the whole in his head part of the narrative.
Yeah.
Because to me, the first part of the car ride, that's a real conversation. That's like a real thing that a couple, like thousands,
For the
if
most
not
part, it
millions of
plays
couples
pretty
have done.
straightforward until they get to the farm. Or
Right. And then the
house or
farm is where it starts to go off the rails. But in that car ride, that conversation that they're having where she's in her head, like, I'm thinking about ending things, and then talking to Jake, and then Jake, it's like he picks up on it. Like he knows, he's read the cues in her tone and her voice and how she's responded to things that he says. And he's like panicking, but he doesn't want to say it. He doesn't want to say like, what's wrong? Why are you like this? Because like, it's this unspoken tension between them. And it's so visceral in the writing and in the acting that like watching that movie, like that's a car ride I've had.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And-
Well, it's like so slow burn.
Yeah. And
You know?
it's fucking hard to watch.
Mhm.
And I love it. I
And
love
it goes
that
on
for
way
it.
too long.
Like
you
a
know?
real car ride does.
Yeah.
And
And
like,
also Like that, the lighting.
Yeah. Oh
Ben,
my God. On the way home when it gets dark.
Me to watch this movie. He was like, listen, there's like a 25-minute car scene where it gradually in real time gets darker. Like they're actually, you know, going like in the middle of the afternoon in the winter.
Yeah.
And it really does. And it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. That fucking scene, dude. And it's like they're having this really dark and heavy conversation during that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps getting darker and darker. And like, I know I talk a lot about my TV. I don't know if I talk about it on the podcast, but like I have an OLED television and
Fancy boy.
I'm super pretentious. It's because I work in an electronics store and I end up
that's why
ending up with
you weren't pretentious before that or anything.
Shut up. I mean, I wouldn't have super expensive bougie like electronics if it weren't for the fact that I like
you have like a massive discount on them.
Well, some of them, and I have the
I've been around people who have knowledge of them and shit.
Right, and I have the like networking contacts to find really good deals when it's not from Best Buy. Anyway, long story short, I have a really nice TV, like a really really high end television, and on OLEDs the pixels get all the way black. So in scenes with darkness like that one, I was watching in my bedroom in the middle of the night, all the lights were out, and the only light was on their faces, and it looked like they were fucking in the room with me. It was insane. Like when it got to the darkest point, it was so dark. It was like it could have fucking been there. And I don't know, man. Like it was a really surreal moment watching that movie. And there are not many movies that I've had that experience watching. So right off the bat, like I was in love with the movie before then, but like I was
by that point you were like, man, this is next level.
Yeah, like this is gonna go up as one of my favorite movies I've ever watched. And I know that's like incredibly high praise.
No, I've been kind of kicking it around in that like kind of vein of thought myself.
Honestly, it's so different though. And it almost warrants a category of its own.
I can't really put into words why I like it so much.
Yeah.
You know, like I can examine the film and like its elements, but like I don't know why I like it as much as I do, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me, it's a lot of, I think the themes are really compelling. I think the acting is really compelling. The cinematography is genius. But I think that like ultimately it's just my kind of vibe. Like it's the feeling that it evokes for me. Any movie that can do this much to me emotionally is a movie that I am immediately in love with.
You know how I can always tell when a film is going to be important to me is when it does something that this film did to me, where I can't go to sleep for 2 hours after it's over because I can't stop thinking about it, you know? And like this movie 100% did that to me. It was actually probably closer to like 3 hours. I was like my fiance had gone to bed and I was like still sitting there, like just trying to like make sense of it. I was like sitting there on the couch, like almost non-respondent, just like I need to think. And she was like, okay, I'm going to go to bed, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that it's that kind of movie. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. So there's this animated movie and I can't for the life of me remember what it's called. And it's like It's a Wonderful Life or It's a Beautiful World or something like that. And it's like animated and it's about this like person who's like dying of like some kind of like mental like brain tumor or something like that. And it's super surreal and it's super obtuse. And it feels like this kind of movie. And for whatever reason, like I just started thinking about that and how like that movie made me feel similar types of ways and felt like it belonged in a category of its own. And I feel that way about this movie. And I think that when I say it's like one of the best movies that I've ever watched, I think that holds true. But I think it's really, it by default is measured by a different standard than something like, you know, I don't know, Mad Max or like.
Well, let me put it this way, Ben. You think about it, this entire movie, this entire story is told. Now, obviously, there's like, you know, art direction and sound design and lighting and cinematography, et cetera, et cetera. But this entire story is just told through conversations. Like it's a never ending series of conversations. And like a lot of those films, like even films that I love, like, Mad Max or like a Marvel movie or something, like there's conversations, but like it's a lot of relying on like big action set pieces and like, eye candy that will pull you in, and spectacle. And, it's more about this cinematic experience, where this is like a real like work of art in the way that a poem is, like you were saying, or like an old play might be, where it's just people talking in different settings. Yeah. And the whole story is conveyed that way. There's nothing more really to it than that. When you really
there's no
think
gimmicks.
about it.
I mean, they're all gimmicks, but there's no gimmicks. Like, I think every individual part of this movie kind of stands on its own two legs in what it adds to the overall like film. I don't think there are some movies that do things that are clearly, I don't know how to talk about it. It's almost like suspension of disbelief, like I feel like some movies draw attention to their gimmicky attempts at like evoking a feeling.
Right.
And I don't think anything like that happens in this movie, or maybe everything is drawn such attention to itself and because that's the point, it's like
you can't pay attention to any one thing because
it's
paying
all
such attention to everything, or you're trying to.
Or right, there's just so much to it to break down. And I guess like you made a good point. It's like poetry. Like there are very few films out there that like can really be approached with that sort of poetic analysis, and this is one of them, and that's why I love it. Also, it's Such a Beautiful Day is the name of the movie that I'm referring to. It's not very long. You should watch it at some point. Anybody out there who hasn't seen it, I recommend it. It's a fucking mind trip. It's a mind fuck. It's a trip. That's what I was trying to say. It's really fucking weird. It's like stick figures, and it's kind of upsetting and disturbing, but you should just watch it.
I'll check it out. Dude, how about that looping staircase sequence? Like in the house, where she's just like walking and it's on just the stairs, just over and over again. She'll get to the bottom, she's back at the top again. Yeah. And like she's playing out like reasons like why like she is staying with Jake, or like why she doesn't like want to, or whatever.
Stuck in the fucking cycle.
Yeah. Like, that's like another thing that's like super symbolic of, just Jake and his.
Is there anything in this movie that's not like hyper symbolic?
No, and I think that actually is one of the beautiful things about this movie, and probably one of the reasons why I love it now that I'm kind of thinking about it more, is that like it doesn't just throw things out randomly. Like I think every single thing in this movie can be dissected for like its metaphorical meaning.
Like they're in the middle of a blizzard, for instance. Like I want to just like take a step back really quick and go back to the boxing in thing. How many layers of boxed in they were? They were boxed in the aspect ratio.
They were boxed in a car.
They were boxed in the car. They were boxed in by the weather. Like it's so many layers.
And they were boxed into what were believed to be as like a somewhat toxic relationship.
Yeah. Well, so and
that kind of
what
boxing,
becomes
emotional boxing,
more and more clearly an obviously toxic relationship.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't let her leave, which is like a whole other
and then like aspect. So what is his explanation every time she says we have to leave? He says, I have the chains. And we like, listen, like we know the chains are just like kind of like, tread for the car or for the tires, but like using like the term chains,
like the right. Yeah. Right down to
the itself, how much weight that carries.
Yeah. It's fucking mind blowing. I mean, even sitting here and talking about it, like I'm thinking about things that I didn't really pick up on when I first watched the film that are now.
This will be like the worst episode ever for like me listening afterward and going, shit, I forgot to bring that up. Because like,
oh my God,
I keep thinking of, like I said, like 10 different things every time we bring up one thing.
This is like Twin Peaks. Like you could probably do a whole show just on the fucking frame by frame analysis of all of the weird shit.
I've listened to podcasts where like it'll be people who love a certain movie so much that they'll go like 2 minutes at a time per episode. Like I listened to one for Evil Dead Baby. 2 where it was like Evil Dead 2 minutes 1 and 2. Evil Dead 2 minutes 3 and 4. Yeah. Like we could do that for like this movie if we ever wanted to.
I wrote a paper when I was getting my associate's degree that was a frame by frame shot. Well, I shouldn't say frame by frame, a shot by shot analysis of Rosemary's Baby.
That must have taken fucking forever.
It did.
Also, shout out to Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't go 4 episodes without bringing it up. Come on. I just want to say, I just like frame by or shot by shot of the whole movie.
It's crazy.
And some of those shots are like a second long, a
Yeah.
half second long, like, and I went
But there's
through
a
not
lot
only
to dissect, dude.
yeah. So, and the way it worked, it was camera angle, dialogue, and then meaning. So it was like, this is what the camera was doing. This is what was happening on the screen. This is why it was relevant. And like, this is how all of those things played together for the overall purpose of the movie. And it's why to this day, I think Rosemary's Baby is also one of the best movies I've ever watched. And maybe I only feel that way because of how I analyzed it, but
That's valid.
yeah, I think so. For those of you who haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, if
What
you
did
watch it and you don't understand it,
Just to
like
keep
why
us
I
like
think
on
it's so
track, because we
great,
only have like
strong.
12 minutes left till we got to call it. But what did you think of the phone calls that she kept getting that were like
Oh,
her
that's
name
right.
every time?
Yeah, I don't know.
I want to think it was old Jake's thoughts.
You think so? I kind of always interpreted, or like at the time, just tried to write it off or interpret it as like she's telling herself to leave. Like it's her, it's messages from herself that like you need to leave, and like not, and her ignoring them.
And that's like, that kind of goes to like, and I like kind of hinted at this like a dozen times this episode so far, but like one thing I really love about this movie is how much it kind of keeps teetering on, will we, won't we become a horror movie?
Yeah. And that's
like
one of
those phone
ways.
calls do it. The way the house is lit and like
fucking
overall
entire
decorated does
school.
it. The basement door does it. The, you know, the story about the pigs does it. Like, and
Yeah.
the part that really, really did it for me is when they're in the car at the second time. And she's like, let's go home. And he's like, no. And he just keeps taking her farther and farther down a dark road.
The dark
and
road,
she's like,
yeah.
something's like, there's no school down here. Why are you taking me down here? Jake, bring me home. And he's like, no.
And honestly,
And I'm like, he's going to fucking murder.
I don't know how you felt about this, but I definitely got like a Overlook Hotel like vibe at that school of like the snow and like the silence.
Well, they're snowed in and stranded like
in the middle of the night. Yeah,
for
and
sure.
It's like
I can
something.
see that.
So just like I'm like something awful's gonna happen here.
Or she's like in the car about to like freeze to death. And then like, you know, and then she gets out of the car, but then the car's locked so she can't get back in.
Oh
Like,
my God, that was
whole scene was
terrifying.
really
that
scary.
was terrifying. And like it kind of did end in a horror way. Like the janitor in their weird interpretive dance like murders them.
Yeah. Or like, you know, she like when she first walks in and she sees the janitor come around the corner, she hides.
Yeah.
And he like slowly like susses her out.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
yeah, he's like, I know you're there.
Where this movie
and
is like,
does, like
or like the
slasher
parents
movie
not
thing.
coming down when they get there.
Oh, that's right.
And they keep pointing the camera up the stairs.
Right. And it's like, are they even real? Like well, you know, they're real because you saw her in the window waving at them.
How about when she finally does go to the basement and they have that super bizarre shot of like Jake up the stairs from her,
like watching as she's
don't go down
and
there.
and she's like going through his like laundry and it's all of his like janitor uniforms.
Yeah.
And you're like,
that was when I realized he was old. He was the old man.
Old man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think up until that point, I had suspected the old man was one of them, but I wasn't sure whether it was him or an older version of his dad. But then you see the old version of his dad, and I was like, oh, so it's him.
And then I think like I'm sure people would be like, well, then why do we see quote unquote old version of Jake? And at the very end, in the A Beautiful Mind is the movie that they're riffing off of, in the Nobel Prize speech part. Because you see Jesse Plemons in old person makeup, and you see Jesse Buckley in old person makeup.
Everybody in this crowd
and it's
is
like really bad
makeup.
old, like
really
like
bad
like
old
like
person
play
makeup.
old
Yeah.
person makeup.
Yeah.
And I think what we're supposed to believe, is
like
that's like his
future
idealized
that he wanted.
version. So he's imagining his idealized version of himself is like young and vibrant, and he's imagining that person old. He's not imagining the person he actually is.
Right. Yeah.
That's like this frail old man. He's imagining like brilliant, you know, older version of like the young Jake that could have become.
Yeah, no, I fucking totally agree with that. Like that's a better articulated way of what I was thinking, and I'm 100%, not a pan shot.
And that's why the janitor uniforms are in the dark recesses of his mind,
because he doesn't want to think about who he actually is.
Yeah,
and
he just wants to imagine the timeline in which he became a nuclear physicist.
And oh my God, is that
Prize.
Fucking relatable? Like, the rejection of reality for a better fantasy where you're a better.
Because he's just
version
thinking,
of yourself.
if I played my cards differently, I could have been a physicist, I could have been a painter, I could have been a poet, I could have been any of these things that would have had meaning to me. But instead, I wasted my life and now I'm thinking of ending things.
And I think that that's like another way where this movie hurts me so badly.
Yeah.
Because like I struggle with that all the time. And like, and maybe part of it is like imposter syndrome, but a lot of it is like, you know, I could have been a world famous photographer by now.
Right.
Statistically, most people who are super successful are super successful.
Well, now we're at that age where like most like current bands are our age or younger.
Yeah.
And like a lot of upcoming actors are like younger.
Right. Well, that's
like,
yeah.
Like for example, like almost the entire NFL is like our age or younger.
I know. It's fucking awful.
You know, like,
and I'm just like fat and like really out of like, just I smoke weed every single fucking day now.
Weed every day.
Hey, smoke weed every day. But like not in the fun way, in like the like I get home from work and I'm so fucking tired that it's like the only thing I can do to like relax.
Yeah.
Otherwise I sit in bed and stare at the ceiling and think to myself,
so
God, I fucking hate life.
When you see old man Jake, you're seeing what could become of you. And
oh my God, it's
you.
fucking terrifying.
And that's exactly what I related to as well.
Yeah.
I was like, I can see a world in which I become
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I look back on all the paths not taken. What a thing to sit with. And that's one of the things that kept me up after the movie was over. I was like, my God, I didn't want to sit and think about that. But like, this movie's harsh, like you said.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about it.
It does.
Makes you think about a lot of things.
Yeah. It fucking puts shit into perspective in a lot of ways. And like, I think that there are glimmers of hope in that, like.
That line, dude.
Which one?
He was like, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he's like, humans are the only animals that like, that are aware of like their own mortality or something. He's like, so we invented hope.
Yeah, right.
You know, but the message being that hope is a lie. It's a fabrication of our minds.
Yeah,
it's not real.
That's fucking awful and depressing. And I forgot about that until you just brought it up.
Yeah,
I was gonna say there are glimmers of hope in my mind because I'm not that pessimistic, and I'm not,
of course.
Like some of the ways that he talks to Lucy in the car, right, are things that like I wouldn't handle that situation that way.
But it's like, be careful because you could become that.
Yeah,
it's like it's showing you like the dark timeline version of yourself.
Absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
And it's like, don't become that guy.
Yeah, and I don't want to be like a fucking creepy rapist, like janitor who fucking is like in his own mind, his own fantasy.
Yeah,
I couldn't do that.
And just watches like bad Robert Zemeckis movies.
Yeah, I'd be thinking of ending things too. Yeah, I mean like. Yeah, it's kind of dark, you know, especially since like I want to be a teacher and like I want to be I want to be in a school, and like I could totally see like the dark timeline version of Ben. Like, I guess I'll be a janitor. At least I can be in the school. Like,
yeah, because Jake never really grew past that phase of his life. So that's why like literally and thematically he is like forever trapped in that school. Yeah, and that's why ultimately this whole thing comes back to him going to the school. He's like, we got to go to the school. We got to go to the school, even when.
Yo, what do you make of the high school girls at the ice cream place? Because that's like really wild, dude. Because they're like bullying the one girl, and they burned her with chemicals or something.
The best interpretation I could come up with, and I can't even really find evidence for it, other than just that they are girls that are like that were in the high school. Is that like, because they make it a point to show all three of those girls at different points when he's walking through the halls.
Right. And he also has that really creepy dialogue about the girls, the one who's different, and how he can see them, and how he like relates to the girl who's different, and like
he probably stares at her when he's cleaning. And like, this is my interpretation of it, was that like those girls probably did, like, maybe they do work there, and I think but this situation is in his head, where he's thinking of like different experiences he's had with all of them, but he's smashing them into one memory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think there's like that thing to be said where like they mentioned that he keeps going there, like he keeps going to that ice cream place,
and there's like the one girl that doesn't like him or something.
Well, he doesn't want them to see him,
right?
And like he keeps going, but because that's what one of the really bizarre things is, like he insists on getting ice cream. She's like, no, it's fucking the middle of.
They also make
blizzard.
a point that he had like a sugar problem or something. So that's part of it too.
Yeah,
he got like picked on for that when he was a kid,
right? And like he's going to this ice cream place, and he doesn't want to be seen because he's like shamed of like these girls, and he's there with his like girlfriend, and like ashamed of these high school girls who are working there, and then they all start laughing at him, and it's like, you know, I think there's some like
It could just be him like thinking about like his rejection, like being rejected by women.
Well, that's what I mean. I think there's like a sexual element to that whole interaction.
It's like a psychosexual thing.
Yeah. Well, because then there's that girl that he relates to. Mm-hmm. And I think that he's like a creepy old pedophile and is in love with her. And that she's like, because that's like the vibe that I got when he was like in the hallways talking about like the ones who are different, and then shows like shots of this like girl.
Right.
And then he's got this like fantasy of her working at the ice cream store and like maybe rescuing her from the fucking awful blonde ladies, but he can't do it because he's like spineless and fucking. And
none of this is real anyway.
And none of it is real anyway. Yeah. So he just goes there every day.
It's just he's fantasizing. Yeah. I think the whole movie he's fantasizing.
I agree.
I agree. And I think that's the closest thing we have to like definitive proof.
Yeah. Well, the fact that none of the stuff makes sense realistically is definitely
right. Well, and that's why, like, again, like I said earlier, he keeps reframing all of it. Like he keeps like giving the young woman a different name. He keeps giving her a different profession. He keeps like coming up with different like things that he did,
personality traits, and
different ways his mother would describe him, different ages that his parents were. Mm-hmm. Like he's just kind of like fantasizing all these different scenarios and all these different like paths that could have been. And that's why, like, for example, like when they talk about how the two of them met at the dinner table, and there's like, they go on the whole tangent of how it happened. And there's like, and then she goes to say it again. Oh, but he didn't say anything to me. And they're like, wait, so he didn't introduce himself? And then like, they pause for like 10 seconds and they're like, well, not at first. And then like, I think it's like him reframing it in his head, because he knows in reality, he did see that girl at the bar and that's how he imagines her physically. But he knows nothing about her because he never talked to her.
And he might have.
And that's a path that wasn't taken.
Happened, but.
And now he's at the end of his life looking back on the paths he didn't take.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like, that's it. That's the most reasonable like explanation.
And at that, it's 10 o'clock.
I want to keep talking about this movie. There's so much more to say. We didn't really talk about the dog.
Yeah, I think we can give it like 5 more minutes.
Yo, tell me about that dog. You had something to say about the fucking crazy dog.
It's just fucking creepy. I don't know what to make of it other than like that it's just like kind of like a never ending thing. Like every time you see him, because he only comes up like when he's mentioned, you never see him at any other point. And when he comes up, he just does the head shake, and he does it for like 5, 6, 7 seconds. I wonder if it's like supposed
to be like a point of trauma in his life.
Probably.
That he's like only remembers the
times that the dog like wagged.
The wagging of the dog.
Snapped his head or whatever.
Yeah. Because it's like, at the first time you see it, it's like, oh, it's shaking like the way a dog does when it's wet, but then it never stops.
It dangles on it for like several seconds.
Yeah.
And you're like, this is one of the first times like when you first get to the house and you're like, something is wrong.
Yeah. Like,
because when they're in the car the first time, like you said, it's kind of normal.
Yeah.
But then like once you get to the house, shit slowly gets weirder and weirder and weirder. And I think that's like when she first walks in.
Right.
And
it's like there and then it's not there.
Yeah.
And you're kind of led to believe like, oh, maybe it was just like she looked away and looked back and it wasn't there anymore. But like,
what did you make of the mother having like tinnitus?
Oh,
and like it's like a whisper. And she's always hearing voices.
She kept saying like the wrong thing too. She wasn't saying tinnitus. She was saying like tinnitus
or something like
tinnitus.
that.
I have tinnitus.
Yeah.
And he kept getting like just more and more angry about it.
The genus version of Trivial Pursuit.
Oh my God, that whole fucking thing. Like he's so mad about it in this way that like I could really see somebody being mad about it, but like not reasonably at all.
Yeah.
Like that whole,
because his mom is being really wholesome about it.
She's like, I love him. I have my little genus.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, in my little genius.
I bragged to everybody that he was not only really good at Trivial Pursuit, but he was really good at the genius version.
Right. And it's like,
my boy's a genius.
And he like kind of is in a lot of ways. I mean, he's definitely above average in terms of his, I don't know, like knowledge. I don't know if that's
like maybe
necessarily
his IQ.
Yeah. Right.
But like, his social acumen is like non-existent.
Absolutely. And maybe it's partly because he has weird farm parents and his mom is like a crazy schizophrenic and like his dad is like a stiff upper lip British guy who won't talk about anything. Mm-hmm. Also, why is his dad just like a British farmer?
I was wondering that too. I think either it's just like there's a deep lore of like his dad moved to America and met his mom and started a farm, or it's like it probably just doesn't matter. It's probably just one of those things that's just fucking weird.
Yeah, it's just British. Like, well, I think that there's like a culturally British thing. Like British people, maybe not people in general, but like British culture historically is a lot less like emotional the way that that American culture is. And when I say emotional, I mean like emotional. Like they're not as culturally apt to like cry in public or around their family members. Like there's a very long stint of like stoicism in like Protestant British culture. Like you see it in like Winston Churchill, like for most of British history, like he was a common like hero to like the conservative old man. And that's like the culture that his dad has.
Or in a lot of like Pink Floyd, The Wall, you know, like especially the film of it is like exploring, you know, growing up in that environment. Like there's these really gray, like factory towns and everybody's really
and there's
like
no
emotionless
sunshine
and gray.
And like, and even like the way that people talk to each other in England is like different than the way that like we do. Which I think maybe is part of that, like adding to a cold environment that led him to be the way that he is. Because like he's got like his mother's emotional capacity, right? Because his mom is clearly like an emotional person who loves and has compassion, and Jake has that. He's fucking stunted in some way.
But how about when his dad keeps referencing when she's in the bedroom, like, oh, I bet you're not going to be doing any fucking on this bed. It's a twin bed for children. No, it's not meant for fucking. Yeah. And like there's like several times he keeps saying fucking. He's like
fucking. Yeah. I like vaguely remember that. It's like it's like kind of awkward too.
It's like so weird because it's like the scene where he has Alzheimer's and is like forgetting everything.
Oh, that's right. He like walks in the room. There's notes everywhere. Room. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was like kind of weird.
But then when it goes back to him young, the last time you see him, he's like really wholesome. And he's like, remember, you're always welcome here and we love you. But like in that same scene, the mom is literally dead right behind her. Like it's just such a clash of crazy shit.
Well, it's also like, I feel like all of that is so real, you know, like that the moment where he goes in and she's like, bet you're not doing a lot of fucking in here. Like that's like something somebody with dementia says, you know, like somebody walks into a room, doesn't understand what's happening. Is like, oh, this is Jake's room. Oh, you're Jake's girlfriend. You guys aren't going to be fucking in that bed. That bed's for kids. Because like,
it's like disjointed thoughts.
Well, and they're like
really out of place and inappropriate, but
right, because there's
the way
no
that person wouldn't realize
context, you know, when you've got like Alzheimer's or dementia like that, like you don't have the context for the words that you're like the thoughts that you're having. So things just come out, you know, you just say stuff.
And I think it actually is like another really good metaphor for like the movie itself and like the seeming randomness of like Jake's thoughts and
it's like we just
fantasies.
We just aren't seeing it with the context of like the real world. Yeah, because we're only seeing his fantasies, which I think is interesting. That being said, we probably have to
we definitely do.
Guys, if you have stuff that you want to say about I'm Thinking of Ending Things, please email us at yourboomisintheshot@gmail.com.
Yeah, or if you think that we've missed anything.
We missed a shit ton.
A lot, I'm sure.
I bet there are a lot of
different You could write a 50-page
interpretations.
essay on this and you'd miss things.
Yeah, I totally agree. Vam, you're a bastard. You were supposed to be here.
Fucking Vam.
I love you, but you're a bastard.
Shout him out anyway.
I'm going to shout you out anyway. Please email us and have a good night.
Yeah. Peace out, guys.
Your boom is in the shop. Come on, mister. Your boom. Come on, man. You boom.